Our first speaker, Dr. Suadi. Dr. Suadi holds a PhD degree from Tokyo University of Agriculture and Technology in Japan, and his research interests socio-economic of fisheries, empowerment of fishery resource, fishery economy, and also rural development. At this time, he is affiliated with Department of Fisheries, Universitas Gadjah Mada. And today he is going to give a lecture about fisheries management in the tropics, a lesson learned from Indonesia. So, hello, Dr. Suadi, how are you?
Hello, Pak Tony, nice to see you. Thank you. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Well, without any further ado, I will start to hand over this session to our first speaker, Dr. Suadi. There will be 20 minutes for the presentation, Dr. Suadi. And Dr. Suadi, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Pak Tony. It is very important and nice opportunity to be here. I could also meet with Professor Caleb. Nice to see you, and Pak Dedi. Nice to see you too. Well, let me share screen, and I would like to share, hopefully in 20 minutes, about the fisheries management issues, focusing in Indonesian case. Well, I will divide it into 5 parts of my talk, introduction, and I would like to see the fish as a commons and their common problems, and common model of fisheries management, and a recent discussion about the new approach to fisheries management, and some lesson learned from a case study. And last part is closing remark. I just want to remind the first session of our summer course. There is one nice presentation from Nomura, Dr. Nomura, Professor Nomura from Japan. I just highlight his presentation here. He introduced us with the 3 general conclusions of current fisheries, in which we found that marine capture fisheries, if you see this figure on the left side, we can see that the capture fisheries is already at plateau for some years. And therefore, he said that more effective conservation and management is essential if marine production to be maintained. And the third conclusion he made, that more production should come from aquaculture. As we see the figures here, the red one, the aquaculture is still increasing. This just to remind us from the first session. Well, I will try to start from the issue of fisheries, particularly in the case of Indonesia, and I believe in many of topics in developing countries, fisheries plays an enormous role in the term of multifunctionality, not only as a source of main proteins, but also these raw materials of many of seafood industries, and in some countries this engine for growth. If see, for instance, during the pandemic, fisheries, particularly in the Indonesian case, still growing. Even many of other economic sectors declined. And also, in some case, there is an issue of sovereignty related with the existence of the fisheries, including the culture, history, and beside the jobs. This is the multifunctionality of fish and fisheries, and that's why fisheries management is so important in many of tropics, particularly in Indonesia. And more particularly, if we see from the figure of the fisheries, I'm so sorry I haven't translated into English, but based on this figure, we can see that many of fisheries, particularly in Indonesia, dominated by small scale or fisheries with less than 10 gross ton fishing vessels. So this occupy about 96%. And more than 10 gross ton only occupy about 4%, and more small in number if we are said about the industrial fisheries that are more than 30 gross ton, only 1% something. So that's why managing fisheries not only important in the term of its multifunctionality, but for the livelihood of many of people who rely on the fishery resources. And in the perspective of management, I'd like to highlight the Charles said that if we manage the fisheries, we have to manage as a system. What the system are is comprised of three main subsystems: natural subsystem, human subsystem, and management system, which include inside the subsystem from, if you see from the natural system at the level of species, habitat to community. And if we see on the term of management system, then we see from the research issues to policy and planning. And there are some subsystem in a human system. For example, is the issues of infrastructure, settlement, and include post-harvest and market. All those subsystems influenced by external factors. Whether we say nowadays many discussion about if you see a natural system, it will be highly impacted by the climate change, or in some issues related with human system. There are so many macroeconomic policy that will impact the fisheries. And that's why fisheries management that I will like to discuss further later on, not only managing one subsystem, but we see in a comprehensive manner, including the three subsystems. Well, if we see fish, in fact, there are some common characteristic with other resources, what we call is commons or common pool resources. In the context of governing these resources, we always face a challenge because of it is available to more than one person and subject to degradation. The characteristic of the fish as resources, as a commons, it tends to be used by more than one person and subject to degradation. And how we manage those resources? In a long time ago, we managed these resources in a term is exactly the same as the word commons. Means that they are managed by using social relation, the close relation between people and the resources, that the way of people managing the resources. But nowadays, there are big changes that the commons, including the fishery resources, is managed under a market mechanism, or many of management of these resources dominated by the private, the interest of private sectors. There's some issues related fish as commons. And one of the challenges in managing the fishery or the fish as resources as a commons they have two main attributes. These make the management of fisheries, particularly in tropics and including in Indonesia. Becker and Ostrom highlight that the two main characteristics of the fish as commons and why the management of this fisheries very difficult. First is the difficulty of exclusion, either through physical barrier or legal instrument on using the resources. So difficult to exclude others to take a fish. And the second is, even all those people going to catch fish, there are another problem is the subtractability of the resources, or Becker and Ostrom said as subtractability problems. So benefit consumed by one person from others may be different. There's two main problems, and that's why managing the fisheries always came with various nice terminology. One of the terminology that well known for us, the tragedy of the commons. I just cite Hardin said as related with the managing the fisheries as commons, even not directly related to the fish, but many of the commons, ruin is the destination toward which all men rush, each pursuing his own best interest in society, that believe in the freedom of the commons. Freedom in a common brings ruin to all. So that's mean that when we face such characteristic of resources, freedom in commons might bring ruins to all. Why? Because as a rational being, each herdsman seeks to maximize his gain. So that's why in many of commons will face what Hardin called as tragedy of the commons. But another term came after Hardin is comedy of the commons, that introduced by Rose and then followed by Lessig, which shows that even there is potential for this ruin to all, but there are also some of successful in managing the resources, the common resources that will bring everybody happy. But Ostrom state that because of we always see the tragedy and comedy in the managing the commons, such as fishery resources, she introduced and other colleagues introduced what is called drama of the commons. So we may end with tragedy, and also we may end with the comedy. So everybody can be happy if we well manage the resources. If not, that it might be will end with tragedy. This is a very nice terminology when we talk about the fishery management or common pool resources management. So, but the fact is, well, until now we see this trend of fishery resources in which the underfish is very low in number, mostly has been taken at maximum level or unsustainable level. And how the policy respond to those issues, for in the Indonesian case, for instance, we found this 4 type of policy in response to the fisheries situation. For instance, prohibition of catching fish with certain condition and size. Let's say it is prohibited to catch lobster less than 200 grams or less to 6 millimeter of 6 centimeter of carapace length. And there are also, for instance, prohibition of certain fishing gears, prohibition of certain fishing vessels, and prohibition of catching fish in certain fishing ground. That's a typical how many governments deal with the issue of the declining of such fishery resources. Now, what kind of model they use to manage the resources? Well, if we return back to the definition of fisheries management from FAO in 1997, the fisheries management is the integrated process of information gathering, analysis, planning, and so on, to ensure the continuing productivity and the achievement of other fisheries objective. So fisheries management, then we can see here, started from planning until we implement it, or even we monitor the how we conduct the resource management. I will skip this slide for discussion later on, but the three main model that we are in fisheries well recognized is what we call is MSY model, and the second what we call is MEY model, and the third model what we call as OSY or MSCE CY, maximum sustainable yield, maximum economic yield, and maximum social yield, in which those models try to figure out what we call is a reference point. So what number of fish that we can take that could benefit, maximize in the term of production of the fish, or in the term of the economic that we gain from the fish, and the third is related with the social benefit, in which in this determine the reference point here, we are trying to find out the number of fishing effort that may gain in each number of these fish. For instance, in this figure, we can see here exactly in the middle of the parabolic graph, we can see the MSY. So in what number of fishing effort, let's say number of fishing boat that could gain or could contribute to the maximum production of the fish stock. I will show you one example that the current fisheries policy in Indonesia, that call is measurable fishing policy, to determine the number of the reference point or the stock that could be allocated to each of the actors involved in fisheries. So through this policy, government through what we call Komnas Kajiskan, this is the National Commission on Fish Stock Assessment, calculate the number of fish stock in ocean. And then based on their calculation, and then we will find that each of zone in Indonesian fisheries, they identified the number of potential stock, and based on the potential stock, and then they allocated through the allowable catch here in the fourth column, and then based on this stock, and then allocated to different actors in fisheries. Government and then divided the actors into three categories. What we call is local fisheries, commercial fisheries, and new investment. Based on the reference point that this one is what we call is reference point in a total, based on different zones of or fishing area in Indonesia. So based on those number, and then the government allocated 3.8 million tons to local fishers, and then 1.1 million tons for commercial fishers and 4.6 or 4.7 for new investment. So that's mean government decided to make allocation of stocks of fisheries to many of actors in fisheries. But if we see this figure, that we can see that probably the trend of fisheries in Indonesia even in globally decline. But it seems that the allocation for new investment here that indicate that we still believe that fish stock is still big enough for new investment in Indonesia. But what I want to try to explain is how we try to decide the reference point. Based on the reference point, we allocate the number of stock to different actors. And then later on, we will calculate what number of fishing vessels that could use those resources. This is the basically model of fisheries management that currently applied in Indonesia. But we face also another challenge that as tropics with a multi-species, when we see this figure here, you can see we really don't know what kind of fish are those in each of fishing area. But we aggregate or we accumulate all the number of species, and we calculate those as the reference point of as maximum potential yield. The challenge is if we see more detail in each species, probably we face such kind of problem. What we call is as the problem of multi-species. Probably when we are planning to catch C, probably we already lost species A. That's one of challenge, and that's why the new approach to fisheries management try to see the potential or the possibility of ecosystem based of fisheries management. That's one issue. Another issue for new approach to fisheries management is what we call user-based fisheries management, to see or to find out our understanding on interaction between human communities and ocean. This figure came from Valega in his book in 2001. He defined the modern approach or postmodern approach, in which we can see here at early start, we see the resource management basically individual based. In a term of, we see the user use related with their specific characteristic, whether large, small, or big scales, by considering other factor, economic feature, social and culture, but now shift toward group of use. And because of complication, the complicated aspect of the resource management, now there's a second approach to our only group, but now see the more complex, what they call is interacting system. So the fisheries management tends to be more user oriented and see the interaction between or among many other actors and other factors. Let's say here, global change is the interaction factor, or also globalization as the factors. This is the new approach to fisheries management, and this fisheries management approach nowadays, and then try to be more applied to what we call as a new model. Gentov said as a new model, in which resource users must become more involved in the management process. Why? Because they know much about their resources and has long experience with the resources, and they need to be here. For instance, I will just say, give an example of lobster management here in southern coast of Java. When we are trying to conduct a survey, that when new regulation released, mostly fishermen, when regulation is released, first they don't know much about the regulation. If we ask about whether they follow the regulation or not, mostly they didn't follow because they feel that they are not involved. That's why such a user need to be involved in fisheries management new approach, I think. And the last one is last part. I just would like to say this is a very old research that I've conducted to see how possible to include the users in the fisheries or in the coastal resource management. I conduct a study in Jimbaran Bay in Bali, and this is the study site here. It's very close to the international airport of Ngurah Rai, mostly a very dense populated village with 6 hamlets, and this population very big in the number because the village is very small in terms of the size. But the site has very valuable resources. If we are coming to this site, you can see here during the night, full of people coming to this village because it's become now a tourism site. A few years ago, this is a fishing village. Now become as a tourism one of tourism spot in Bali. They are just coming for enjoying sunset during the afternoon, and then have lunch, dinner in the night. But what is the interesting thing is what I would like to share how community, if we involved, they can share the resources. So we can see here there are 2 parts of the coastal side of this village. They have about if you are going through this beach, it's only about 1 kilometer, but they divided the beach for 2 purposes. One, this is in the one side about 500 meters, and another side for another activities. One side for a fishing village, one side for another part is for seafood restaurant. Sorry. So they divided or they try to share the resources, and that's why they could benefit for the crowded people who want to enjoy seafood during the night, while other people could still going fishing for their livelihood. This is one of example of how people, if they attract to be involved in decision making, they could be possibly generate collectively the resources. I think that's all my presentation, Pak Tony. We will have much more discussion if you need much more information from the study side. As conclusion, I just want to share that if we manage the commons basically by involving the community, in fact, we are trying to attract their use of say rules that basically based on their norm, values, and belief that could become collaboratively work together with the public policy or government, or even with the private sector. And if they could collaboratively work, that I think there is a possibility for doing what we call is co-management. Thank you, Pak Tony, for the time. Hopefully I don't use much of the time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Suadi, for giving us such informative and interesting presentation. And let's continue to our second invited speaker, Professor Caleb Gardner. Before I hand over to our second speaker to get started, let me introduce him briefly. Professor Caleb Gardner holds a PhD degree from University of Tasmania in Australia, and currently he is the head of the IMAS Fisheries and Aquaculture Center, the director of the Sustainable Marine Research Collaboration Agreement. Today, he is going to give a presentation about an overview of Australian fisheries management. So, hello, Professor Gardner, how are you?
I'm very well, Tony, thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, well, without further ado, I will start to hand over the opportunity to our second invited speaker, Professor Gardner. The time is yours.
Thank you. All right. So I'll try to share my screen. So let me see if I can get that operating. Now, is that bringing up the talk presentation properly, Tony?
Yes.
I think that looks good. Okay.
Yeah, good.
Good. All right. Yes, an interesting talk, Suadi. Thank you. So Suadi has been my friend for many years, and we haven't been able to travel for a long time, but I think we're still thinking very similarly, Suadi, because your talk is very good, helpful connection to the information I'm about to talk as well. So it's as if we planned this together. I also wanted to talk about similar issues to what Suadi has spoken on in terms of objectives and reference points in fisheries, but I will try to give you some context from what has happened in Australia, just to give you a different perspective as well, and on the way that these same ideas have been used. So, just first of all, a very general comment on Australian fisheries in contrast to those in Indonesia. The whole production of fish for consumption is sort of less important in Australia. Most of the food, if I went to my fish shop, a lot of the fish I could buy is probably imported. And strangely, a lot of the fish we catch, we export. And so the fisheries we have in Australia tend to be small volume, but very high value export fisheries. So they're these very expensive sorts of fish, such as lobsters. Toothfish is a species caught in subantarctic waters, very high value. Bluefin tuna, Indonesia, I'm sure you're very familiar with that. Indonesia being another important harvesting country for bluefin tuna. And abalone, they are a marine snail, which are again a very high value, but very small volume. And then one of our other large fisheries is for sardines, and the reason we catch those is not for humans to eat, but to feed them to the tuna, which we keep in cages and fatten bigger. So I guess a point there is that our fisheries are much more around the economics and the profits rather than so much food supply. That is the reason that we get some benefit. Now, I wanted to talk about some of there's been very significant changes over the last 20 years in Australian fisheries, and I just think it would be interesting to understand why, or what's been different. This is when I started with the University of Tasmania. This was a very famous fishery. My university actually, or the people I was working with, helped discover this fishery. So it was the orange roughy fishery. So you can see the fish there. There's a very deep water fish, but the fishery became very big very quickly, and there was a lot of money being made very quickly, and it became very famous as a big valuable contribution to our economy. But then in the space of a few years, the fishery crashed. And it became famous for all the wrong reasons. It became famous for very bad management, for overfishing, and for squandering and wasting what should have been a valuable resource that should have been providing economic and food benefits to the community for many years. Yes. Riza.
Sorry to interrupt you. Your screen is not moving, actually.
It's not moving? So
no.
Can you see any fish now? No?
No.
Good. Thanks for interrupting, Riza. So you're still stuck on the front page. Okay. It's good to know. I might just do, can you see the orange fish now?
Yeah, but can you optimize the slide?
Maybe if I just do it like this. Can you see a slide now with lobster and a tuna on it?
Yeah,
clear.
Okay, so this is not ideal, but maybe I just do it like this so it works. Okay, maybe I'll do that. So this is, yes, please interrupt again, Riza or Tony as well too, if it's not working. Thank you. So these are the main species I mentioned before: lobster, abalone, toothfish, tuna, and then sardines. And so these were the orange roughy, which I was just talking about, being the trawl fishery, which collapsed. But so we used to, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we had a lot of overfished stocks in Australia, but this is more recent data, and so it just shows you, it gives you an overview, a very general picture of the stocks status in Australia. So most of the stocks you can see, I hope, are now green, and so that means that they are sustainable, and there are only a small number of stocks that are in this red category of being overfished. And here's the important thing: of those small number that are overfished, we're doing something about it. They're not just continuing to be overfished. Something has changed in management. So here is one of the species that is assessed as being overfished. It was this abalone species. And so management has responded to the scientific information that overfishing is occurring by cutting the catch by 80%. Here is another species, school shark. They were assessed as overfished, and the fishery has actually been closed for that. So there is still some tiny catch coming in as bycatch, but it's been cut by more than 98%. So essentially we've stopped allowing that species to be landed. And here is another one of the species that is found to be overfished. And so in this case, the catch has been cut, and also a change has been made to increase the size limit. So now it's a very large increase, an extra 25 centimeters bigger than what the size limit was before. So the point here is, when a problem is being found, something happens. There is a response. So there's the two very simple points. First of all, of course, we needed scientific information. We needed to be able to establish if a fish stock was being well managed or overfished. And then when a problem is identified, management action is occurring. So this really leads on to the question, why didn't that happen? This sounds so simple, right? Identify a problem and then do something about it. Why were we not doing it 20 years ago? What has changed that this response is happening more? And the response has been many of the sorts of things that Suadi was talking about. It's around what we essentially just call harvest strategies. So within a harvest strategy, there are objectives, there are reference points, and there is a rule. So when you see a change in the stock, there is a path or a set of rules that leads to a decision about what happens. So the first step of the harvest strategy is this issue of collecting, that we have a fish stock and there is a catch coming out of the fish stock, and we need to make sure there is some monitoring. There is data being collected, and it needs to be good quality data that we can use with science to assess the stock, and then we have a decision rule. And it's these elements that really control the harvest, that are really bundled up, captured together and called a harvest strategy. And altogether, they then create a management response, which affects the way the fishery operates and then the fish stock. And so it goes around in a circle. Now, most of the rest of the talk, I just really wanted to explain this figure because it's very critical to the changes that have happened in fisheries management in Australia, leading to improvement in stock statuses. So I'll just explain this figure a little bit. Ideally, when we're assessing fisheries, we collect information on two things, very generally speaking. So one thing is fishing mortality. So that might be, in a sense, the catch, how much of the stock is being caught every year. And that's important because that's the thing which we can control with our decisions in our fisheries management through the government. And then the other side of this this plot is showing the biomass, how much stock there is, and that is a fraction of how much stock there was before fishing occurred. So this is the response to our management decisions. So fishing mortality on the y-axis and biomass on the bottom axis. Up in this corner of the plot, coloured red, this is an area where the biomass, excuse me, you can hear my dog barking in the background. We've up in this top corner, we have low levels of biomass and high levels of fishing mortality. So that's a bad combination for a fish stock. It's essentially the sort of areas where we would worry about overfishing. Not much stock and high levels of fishing. At this corner, we've got low levels of fishing mortality, but the stock is still at very low levels of biomass. Here is the opposite situation where biomass is high, but levels of fishing mortality are also high. And so this is an area which we might expect the high levels of fishing mortality to push this stock towards being overfished in the future. And right down in the bottom right corner is sort of a very healthy level of stock where the biomass is high, the fishing mortality is low. And so that's an area where the stock should remain high. So now let's pretend we have a fishery and we have gone out and we have information from the fishery, we've done a stock assessment, and we've been able to come up with estimates of the fishing mortality and the biomass. And so that would allow us to put a dot on this figure. In this particular example, then the biomass is low, so we're down towards this end of the figure, and the fishing mortality is high, so we're up here, and there's our stock. So that's a situation where it's in a part of the stock status which we would think is a bad situation to be, or something we should be concerned about, and so we should do something. Now, this is, I guess, where we were 20 years ago. We used to be able to identify problems like this, but the difficult part was then we would have meetings and everyone has a different opinion about what should we do. Some people would say we should close the season, or some people would say, actually, there's nothing wrong here. It's just that the scientific data isn't accurate enough, or this was just a bad year. There was bad weather this year and we couldn't go fishing, and that's the reason the data is wrong. And there's all sorts of excuses and reasons what people would come up with for not doing anything or delaying the actions, and we would have the fishing industry arguing with the government, and essentially nothing happened. And that was a recipe for our stocks deteriorating and becoming overfished. But now, with our harvest strategies, there is a rule. So the rule is this black line. Now, if we assess our stocks as being up here, then there is no longer any argument. We have this decision rule. So in this example, we need to try to move our stock towards being on this black line. And that's all agreed beforehand and locked into our rules. So in this case, we can't change the biomass quickly, but what we can change is the fishing mortality. And so this decision rule would force us to drop the catch. There would be no debate, no politics, no co-management. The rules need to be changed. And so we would hope the catch would be reduced. And then through time, because the catch is lower, we would hope the stock we would expect the stock would increase and improve, and we would get back up to level 3, which is back in the healthy area of the fishery. So that's the theory. I just wanted to show you this in practice. Here is a fishery which we do this on. This is the abalone fishery in Tasmania. Now you can't see all this data, but I just wanted to show, like a lot of fisheries, we collect a lot of different data, and different lines for catch and catch rates go up, and biomass and other things we measure. Some of them go up, some of them go down, and it's often very hard looking at all these different sources of data to make a decision. Everyone, again, has different opinions about what should we do with the management regulations next year. Should we try leaving more abalone in the sea, reducing catch, or can we increase the catch, the harvest? These are very difficult decisions in the past, but there is this little part of the figure here, and I'll expand that for you. This is what's changing things for us. So in this case, what we do is we have a formula, mathematics, of using all those different sources of data, condensing them down into a score for the fishery, and that gives the fishery a score. And in this case, the fishery comes up with a score of almost 7. Now, what that means is there's a rule that's associated with that score, and that means there should be an increase in catch if the fishery is scoring well there. So this is a way of just basing our decisions entirely on the data, entirely on the science, and not on just opinions and on politics. Now, how do we get that score? Well, of course, that's very important. There needs to be a good process on scoring the fishery. And in this fishery, what we do is first of all, we measure the catch rate. So this is the amount of kilograms that an abalone diver, what happens in this fishery is a person puts on a wetsuit, breathes compressed air, and they go down and harvest abalone. And there you can see their catch rates are quite high. They're catching around 100 kilograms per hour of abalone. And so we have a system here where we can read the catch rates that it's actually seen in the fishery, and then that gives them a score. So in this case, if the catch rate was 100 kilograms, the score would be 5. Then we also look at the way the catch rate has changed through time. This gives us a sense if the catch rate is going up, it shows the stock is improving. And if the catch rate is going down, it tells us the stock is getting worse. So we score this as well. Now, my message here is this data is very simple. A lot of fisheries stock assessments can be very complicated. They can be complicated modeling, and sometimes you need lots of data. This system being used with our abalone fishery, all we need to know is how much catch is being caught every year and the amount of fishing effort that's occurring. So it's very simple data that most fisheries in the world are collecting, and we're able to use very simple data, use it to generate a score on the health of the fishery, and then use that score to make a decision on what the fishery management should be. So here is this fishery, the performance of that fishery using this scoring system, the way that has been tracked through time. And that has been used to set the catches now in future years, and it has helped improve that fishery. Now I just wanted to say a little bit about these reference points. So Suadi mentioned reference points as well. This is an important one. It's called B limit. It's the limit level of biomass, and being a limit, the idea is that we should not ever allow the biomass to fall down below this point. That is the point where if the stock gets to that level, we must stop the fishery, we must close it. You had an example of that before, if you remember. I showed you the school shark. So this is a stock which fell below that limit, and the management response has been to close that fishery. That's the ideal. It's also an important point because it's what we in Australia at least use as being our measure of what is a sustainable fishery or not. If a stock is above that limit reference point, it doesn't mean that it's healthy, but it does mean that we would call it sustainable. So school shark were below that point. We would say that's not a sustainable stock. It's overfished, but it also means it's just overfished in the sense it's not providing as much production as what we would like in a fishery. It doesn't mean the fishery is about, or the species is about to go extinct. We've found, I'm not sure what it's like in Indonesia, but we find in Australia, the public become confused about this a lot. One example is tuna. So bluefin tuna were down at the level of being overfished, and a lot of people thought that meant they were about to become extinct. And so we had campaigns of people wanting to protect tuna. That was in 2011, this poster. And then only 4 years later, by reducing catch in our tuna fishery, we had very good response. In Indonesia as well, we share the same stock, and the stocks improved and catches were able to be increased. So overfishing does not mean that the species are about to go extinct. It just means that they are not being well managed in terms of production. This is another interesting example. So remember this, look at this figure. So if our fishery was at this point here, if we trace down to where it is on the biomass line, it's above the limit reference point. So this is a stock which we formally would say is not overfished. But can you see it's still certainly not a stock that we should be proud of the fishery management. It's still a stock that is very depleted, and it's a stock where fishing effort is still too high. So this is the difference. Sustainable fishing is an important thing to have, but it doesn't mean that the management is doing a good job. So we need to do more than just have sustainable fisheries. We need to have fisheries that are actually right up being managed very well. And this is, if you recall, Suadi showed the figure of different sort of targets for the fishery, like maximum sustainable yield or maximum economic yield or maximum social yield. Those are the sorts of objectives that you would start getting if you have the fishery back here. So a sustainable fishery is okay. You don't want a fishery that is not sustainable, of course, but we want something that's more than just sustainable. We want a fishery that is being managed very, very well. Most Australian stocks, by the way, are not up here on the flat part of the line. They're not at maximum sustainable yield or maximum economic yield. And they're not overfished. They are somewhere in between, which means they're on this part of the line. So look, just that's the main points I've wanted to make. But there's also just a few things on clarity on the objectives. I just very briefly wanted to make the point that in Australia, there seems to be confusion around what we really want from our fisheries, and that's been a problem. It's often not possible to do everything. Some people think we should have our fisheries providing lots of employment. Other people think we should have them providing lots of economic yield, and other people would prefer that we maximize catch. But as Suadi showed, they are different choices. You can't, unfortunately, do all these things. You have to pick one thing and give that priority above others. There are trade-offs. Another problem which we have a big problem in Australia and is that we're managing a lot of our fisheries to provide a lot of economic benefit, but that economic benefit tends to go to a very small number of fisheries owners. It's not providing economic benefit to the wider community. And surprisingly, perhaps, because I know Indonesia has very sensible political controls on who can own assets in Indonesia, but in Australia, we allow free trading of things like fisheries. And so a lot of our fisheries are actually owned by companies overseas. And so the economic benefits just are transferred straight away out of the country rather than providing an economic benefit back to the community. So very important to think about what do we want from our fisheries and who benefits from them, and adjust our management systems to provide those benefits. And then the last sort of critical element of fisheries as well, of course, is enforcement. So we can have the best science in the world, assess stocks very well, have very good sensible systems on coming up with decisions on the way we should use stock information to manage our stocks, but all of that achieves nothing unless we have very good enforcement of the rules. So Australia has a lot of quota managed fisheries. They have some problems, but one benefit of them is it becomes very easy to measure catch. We have a small number of ports usually as well. So when fish are landed on the ports, there is very good systems for measuring all of the catch, and also very good policing to make sure that there is no undersize animals being landed. And so if there are small animals being landed from any sector, there is very heavy prosecutions and it just doesn't happen. So enforcement of the rules is also critical. that was it for me. I hope that was clear enough, and I hope you could understand I hope I didn't speak too fast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Gardner, for sharing information and knowledge regarding Australian fisheries management. And because Professor Gardner has another agenda, we will have a discussion session with Professor Gardner in advance. And I think I see here in the chat box, there are two questions to Professor Gardner. Let me read the question. The first question is from Muhammad Attar. The question is, Australia fish stock is in a good status. The question is how Australian government applied their fisheries regulation to the fish industry, and who is the responsible to conduct the fisheries status in Australia?
Thank you for that question. Both, and there's two questions there, and they're both very good. I think I covered the first half of that question towards the end of my talk as well, talking about the way that we have we regulate the government decisions mainly through quota systems. So this is mainly involving having police officers at the ports where fish is landed, and we have electronic and paper monitoring systems to ensure that the catch is tracked all the way through. So very critically, they measure, there's very good systems for ensuring we can measure total catch cheaply just at the ports. So we don't need people, we don't need to have boats, police on boats. So it's just measuring the catch. And then also size. Size is critical. So if anyone is, if we're in a restaurant or you see anywhere a fish that is under the size limit, then there are big fines, and the police will enforce that very quickly. The other question, though, was around who conducts the status. Very interesting question, actually, because it's critical that it's really important that the information is independent. So we have different organizations who will do the stock assessment, but it works best where we have people who are separate from the government and separate from the fishing industry. I work at a university, and so the reason that my university does stock assessments is because of this need for independence. So the Tasmanian government could employ their own fishery scientists to conduct the assessments and determine stocker status, but they don't do this. They give money to a university and they say, university, you do the assessment information, we will give you all the data, and the university, now we have got no obligation to anyone in industry or anyone in government. It's completely independent, and so we can be open and honest and give the status.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Gardner, for the answer. And let's continue to the second question to Professor Gardner. From your presentation, have been said that how to increase the fish biomass is lowering the fish catch, and the fish can recover the biomass itself, but it still needs time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and the question is, if this is applied in Indonesia, the problem will be how many traditional fishermen that lost their job because the fishing limitation. And some of the traditional fishermen in Indonesia catch fish daily, and sometimes they even can cover the cost for going fishing. Yeah, I think this is
isn't this a fascinating question? It's such an important question. And so also consider that if you don't, sometimes if you don't make a change today because you are worried about the employment of people today, it may mean that in 1 year or 5 years or 10 years time, you are creating poverty for people in the future by not making difficult decisions today. So the economically formal answer to your question is that we need to try valuing people's employment today, this year, and also all the years into the future. And if we have an understanding, if we know that a large reduction, supposing we have a situation where we think we need to reduce the catch, and we are concerned about the employment of people into the future. So we have lots of choices. We have a choice of doing nothing, and we know the consequence of that is people keep their employment and they keep their businesses going this year, but we know the consequence of that is that in the future that we will be creating extra needless poverty. Another option would be to cut the fishery very quickly, and then we know the consequence of that is that there is a terrible loss of employment in the current year, but in future years we will see benefits. And so the real solution, though, is somewhere in between, where we may need to take small changes, but we still need to put ourselves on a pathway. We did an analysis of this in one fishery, and we were finding that even a change of just 2% per year, if you keep just making small changes year after year after year, that was able to get the stock recovering. And overall, it is often possible to make small changes that doesn't lead to large loss of employment, but you still get a benefit. So, for example, it may mean we start closing the fishery for 1 day a month. And then the next year we close it for 2 days a month. And then the next year we close it for 1 day a week. And maybe that's enough through time. That would be enough just to start making small changes. No one notices, and the food supply through time should actually start going up. And so at some point you would hope the benefits start outweighing the cost. You definitely need to do that without creating an economic shock through the system. And the other element of that too is often there are other parts of the system, sometimes which you don't want to put economic shocks through. So, for example, it may be necessary to have a processing shed. Now, if you make a large change to the catch, sometimes the processing shed will go out of business. And it's no use saying we can start the fishery up again in 3 years' time, because at that point, the processor has gone. So you do need to be careful and make some of these changes slowly, but I think it's possible to do everything. I think it's possible to look after stocks and protect employment and just make adjustments. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, a very clear explanation, Dr. Gardner. And I think we still have time for one more question. If anyone would like ask a question.
I'm going to stay around for a little bit longer too and listen to the next one too, but I had a family obligation later on. So thank you for slotting my questions in now. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there is no more question.
Good.
Or Dr. Suadi, a question?
No.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
It will be nice to see you in September.
I hope so too. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, any question? No? Well, because Professor Gardner has another agenda, we have to end the session with our second speaker for today. I thank Professor Gardner for sharing the interesting presentation and good discussion. I hope to see you in another occasion. Good afternoon and thank you. Please give applause to Dr. Gardner. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gardner. Well, let's continue to our third speaker. We have Dr. Dedi Adhuri. Before I hand over to our third speaker to get started, let me introduce him briefly. Dr. Dedi Adhuri holds a PhD degree in anthropology from the Australian National University. Now he is a senior researcher at Research Center for Society and Culture, Indonesian Institute of Sciences, our National Research and Innovation Agency, BRIN, Indonesia, and he is going to discuss about common governance under a changing global environment. Dr. Dedi Adhuri, welcome to our online summer course. How are you, Dr. Dedi Adhuri?
I'm good, thank you, Mas Tony.
Yeah.
For the opportunity. Good afternoon or evening, maybe for some people. Yeah.
Well, without further ado, I will start to hand over to our third invited speaker, Dr. Dedi Adhuri. The time is yours.
Thank you, Mas Tony. Let me allow me to share my screen. Do you hear my voice clearly?
Yeah, very clearly.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I don't find.
Do you need help, Dr. Adhuri? We can share your presentation.
Put it in slideshow. Oh, here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Please let me know after I speak about 15 minutes. So I don't consume too much of time. So yeah, here is my presentations. I was asked to talk about research management under the global change. I choose a specific topic from that big topic that I was asked for. So I'm focusing my talk on changing global markets and their impacts to local communities and fisheries in Indonesia. As you might still be remembered what Pak Sony introduced about me, my background is anthropology, so I will not talk. My talk will be more on the people rather than on the fish and the numbers. This is more I'm going to talk introductions and the international activities and anchovy markets and their local impacts. I would like to discuss these issues, this topic pertaining to Maluku as a case for reference. And the third part is internal green market and local fisheries. I'm using Sumbawa case as an example of this case and some closing remarks at the end of my presentation. Let me start with the introductions. Fish and fisheries very important for us, for our lives. Small-scale fisheries, as Pak Suadi mentioned in his presentations in Indonesian context, majority of Indonesian fisheries, the majority of Indonesian fisheries players is small-scale fishermen, meaning those people who or fishers who operate fishing using 10 gross ton below motor boats. Yeah, and for them, of course, fisheries also important for livelihoods, source of nutrition, food and nutrient for themselves, also for income. For us, the nations, of course, we need fish for our food as well. Nonetheless, as also mentioned in the two presentations before, all around the world, there's a crisis in the world. In the 1970s, the world's per capita production actually landed that the fish has been overexploited. Correspondingly, the catch per unit of fishing effort and the catch per dollar invested in the fisheries also steadily decline. This is a economic problem derived from the overexploitation natures of the fish. People fishing for a limited number of fish or overexploited fish. So the third point that I would like to discuss in this introduction present in this is that market is very important in fishery sector. Why? One of the reasons is because the perishable natures of the fish. The catch from fishers cannot automatically turn into income unless they are delivered, the fish are delivered to the market. If there's no market, particularly in the situations or circumstances where there's no preservation machinery or equipment, fish is easily get rotten. So if they are not immediately sent to market, connected to market, that will be get rotten and cannot be turned into money or income for fishermen. So market play a very important role in the productivity of fisheries sectors. In that context, markets also drives fisheries practices, as I will discuss using these two examples from Maluku and from Sumbawa. So the fact that markets also is considered with that the fishermen also use market as instrument for governing fisheries. I believe all of you have already certification, for example, and SC-TAFM and other type of certifications which are used to govern fisheries practices on the ground. Now let me start the second part of my talk, talking about the international live free fish and anchovy market or trades and their impacts to local communities and fisheries. This is the starting point. So the market in Chinese. In China, the culture of eating is strongly associated with eating fish. Johannes and Riven, for example, notes that Chinese like to eat in seafood is the food of the foods. The most popular species mainly fish, which is alive until minutes before appearing on the table. So this we are talking about live free fish, but it's also applied to different type of fish, such as anchovy in this regard. So now this is the site that I'm going to discuss in regard to how international market of live free fish and also anchovy influencing the local communities and fisheries. This is the research site in K Islands, eastern part of Indonesia in Maluku. So this is the K Islands. And my research was conducted in these parts of the islands. So currently, this is administratively under two different district administrative, the Kota Tual and Maluku Tenggara. And I spent large amount of my time in these specific villages called Glabal, which is consists of two settlements. They call it the settlements Kampung Islam and Kampung Katolik, in reference to Muslim settlements and Catholic settlements. And these villages are governed by two, overlapping governance system. That is the traditional system, referring to traditional norm that are applied in that particular village, but also there are some influence of Indonesian governance, modern state governance system. So the village is called desa by Indonesian modern regulations. By the traditional, they call it ohoy. So with that two systems that plays a role, are rules in the managing coastal communities, these communities. So there are some there are two different elements. One associated with the traditional governance system, the ohoy system, and the other elements associated with modern desa ohoy or desa, that is, for example, village heads or kepala desa. So, and this two system actually, when they are applied on the ground, is the single village, created a tensions between these two different elites. In fact, there have been a kind of tensions between two different political factions in the village. One faction other faction associated modern system elites, and the third one is they are mostly from Muslim settlement, and the other one is the leaders from Catholic settlements. So this contestation sometimes broke in the form of conflict. Yeah. Talking about local fisheries management, so this particular community claim communal tenures to both actually islands and these islands. So with this, all of this area one is free for everybody of the villagers to access, to make use, and to fish, but it's closed for non-villagers unless given permission or ask permission from local leaders or local villagers. So there's there are some kind of traditional fisheries management applied in that particular area. There are some fishing activities, of course, in that particular waters. These are some pictures, particularly the first two above are the traditional fishing method used by the villagers. These are fish or lip net used by outsider, owned and used by outsider. I'll tell you later why I put the pictures there for the third part. So this is the connections of the international market and the impact to local communities, social orders, and fisheries management. Yeah. So starting the demand of the fish from the China or Hong Kong populations, and this is taken by foreign companies who use sign it in everything. For the live groupers, yeah, which is illegal by Indonesian state laws. In protecting their illegal practices, of course, they alliance with local military, police, and government officers, and also they entering in order to get access to the local they contacted or make a deal with the local traditional leaders. Yeah. So with the permission of traditional, they can access this area. The problem is, so the problem is, this company did not go through village heads. That is the formal governments in the village. So it was created a kind of conflict resistance from the village heads, political factions. Then these practices were stopped by the village head factions, because what happened was that conflict between these traditional political leaders associated factions with village head factions. Again, with that, I hopefully show you that how the market, international market, the connection to local people or local communities has created a conflict, as well as in functions of the traditional marine resource management. That is the examples of the first example is pertaining to live free fish. The second one is another example still in Maluku in that particular place, but concerning the anchovy connections. Again, it started from Taiwan, who like to eat anchovy, and this is taken by a Taiwan fishing company who at the time married to local Japanese woman, and also work with Indonesian fishing company in the form of joint ventures. So they went to these areas through several, at least 2 different, lines using local collectors, and then local collectors. Is caught by LiftNet. Yeah, the third picture that I showed you earlier, and it was owned and operated by non-villagers. So according to local regulation, it was not legal. It was not permitted until unless the local village give permission to them. In this case, they do not ask permissions. So in fact, they ask permission from other villages. So again, it's created a problem because Dula village protested this fishing operations. So again, this case also shows how international markets in this regard anchovy trade, which is exported to Taiwan, created tensions of local tensions of different villages, as well as ethnic conflicts. What I call ethnic conflicts, because the local collectors actually supported the LiftNet own and operated by outsiders. In this regard, the Buton is not local. The local is called Kaijipa. So that's why it's also some interethnic conflict between the Dula Laut people and the Butonis who are operating or who was operating the LiftNet. Again, these cases also show not only conflict triggered by the connections of anchovy trade or market, but also the breach of local fisheries management practices. Now, let me go to another case into what I call international market. So, as I mentioned in the introductions, there's some, incentive, or in fact, the market the market-based fisheries management, by which market incentive is used to influence the fishing practices, the fisheries management on the ground. So this is quite different from conventional fisheries management. If you go to remember what was explained by Professor Gardner and Suadi, when they're talking about fisheries management, they're talking about the fish, particularly concerns about the sustainability of overexploitation of the fish. But market-based starts their concern with the economy, particularly the business economy and problems. So in this regard, this approach is to kind of seduce the fishers or influence the fishers by giving them economic incentive rather than from the first. If you look at the first approach, that's conventional approach, people or management concern more on controlling people behavior in regard to catching the fish. Market-based approach is started by concerns of providing a better economic condition or support to the fishers. Indonesia asked to do a proper or sustainable fisheries or fishing practices. So this is the Lesser Sunda Sustainable Fisheries Initiative, which is one type of market-based fisheries. So this is an endeavor aimed at establishing market-based sustainable fisheries management system in the Lesser Sunda region or Sumbawa in Indonesia. The initiative focuses on institutionalizing an approach of territorial use right in fisheries or term and supported by marketing, production, and post-harvest. The implementation of this initiative is a public-private partnership. These are several stakeholders, institutions that get involved in this endeavor or LSSFI. So the incentive that was provided by particularly companies who was in this context trying to establish and socially fair fisheries management in the locality is first was marketing incentive, that is giving transparent pricing, provisioning premium buying price, and SPT payment system to the business, and production post-harvest management support to fishers in the form of banking support for loans, post-harvest handling, financial management training, and so on and so forth. So this is the more or less the conditions of the fishing practices and marketing in this particular place. This is in Sumbawa Island, in the West Nusa Tenggara, Indonesia. This is the island. And these are depicting the boats and fishing gears. This is the targets of and associated boats, and this is the fishing grounds of these gears and boats. This is more or less the target group and the fishing grounds, yeah, as also reflected in the pictures in the slide before. So if we are talking about the unit of management, we should deal with these complexities and this space, yeah, marine space. This is some characters of economic relations technology. The bigger the technology, the bigger the investment needed for the fishing for fishing operations, and then bigger is the dependency of fishers to different agency outside of production system. That is mostly the bosses, which are all was almost the bosses that so if you look at example, the bosses is usually around here. So every business are associated with one or two of business collectors up to and this connection is relatively stable and kind of tied by a norm that is upheld by these communities. So, for example, every fishers who are affiliated by their bosses usually has a kind of debt relations, and they are, it is an obligatory for them to sell the fish to this particular seller of fish collectors. And the collectors are mostly of women's buying important marketing. So this is another example showing that actually the capital is also aligned with the fish marketing chains. So the fish going up from the fishermen and the capital flowing from the up to the fishermen. So this makes this connection not easy to reach. Otherwise, there will be a kind of socio-economic instability and unstable in that community. So these are what happens when the incentive, market incentive are provided by the company. So in theory, people and local traders are very supportive to incentive to market incentive pricing, buying prices with payment system because it addresses the existing problem in this marketing. And also, of course, premium market provide more benefits to fishers and the collector. The problem is, as I mentioned earlier, the relations between the fishers and the marketing chain agencies, yeah, the fish collector is already stable and was tied with, you know, debt relationship. So it's not easily when this company in this regard, Bali Seafood International, want to get involved and buy their fish, it's not easy because almost all fishers are already connected to you know, marketing chains. Not only tied by debt relationship, which is a kind of obligatory for the fisher to sell the fish to a particular fish collector, but also what we call it as a moral economy. Locally called as principle of bagi-bagi rezeki. That is, you know, because they are not only connected in terms of economic relations, the fish seller and fish buyer, but they are also connected with various others connections, such as neighborhoods or families and other social, you know, contexts. So it's difficult to bridge that connections. That means also difficult for the company to get in to cut the connections that are already stable or well established in the community. Post-production, post-harvest, and financial management support to fishers is similar to the marketing incentive. This incentive would also help tackling the existing problem in fish production and post-harvest handling. Thus, fisher receive well. Nonetheless, the challenge would be to create special banking services. Because we know, yeah, in general, fishers household are poor, so they have no mortgage to be used to get access to loan from the bank. That's why actually the patron-client functions well there, because the fishers are not bankable. So when the company introduce and you know want to get them linked to a bank, that for actually subsistence fishers, bank is not really needed because the money that they are collected from the got from the harvest of today, for example, might be needed for, you know, their you know, consumption the other day after. So they don't need bank as a kind of mediator for saving or for saving the money that they earn from this, because they don't need because they might be used tomorrow for their household need. So in terms of establishing territorial use right in fisheries and reserve, the problem is in Indonesia, small-scale fisheries is open access fisheries. So even though they can establish some local regulations, if they are not tied to a formal government regulations affiliated with fisheries, they want this regulation won't be effective because external fisheries and external fishers can access the resources. So the inter-ethnic relations or relation between local and income outsider fishers become a problem in but in practice, however, there are a kind of strong association between the local fishers with the territory of their fishing grounds. So I mentioned earlier the association between fishing gears and boat with fishing grounds. Movement of basis that the community has kind of priority rights to particular fishing grounds. With that, they can talk with people internally in that particular fishing communities and talk also with outsider fisher to start manage their fisheries, their territory. But again, as I mentioned earlier in the challenge part of this has to be a kind of collaborative effort and also supported by government regulations. I mean, if the fact that small-scale fisheries in Indonesia is open access, to be there or to acknowledge local practices, despite the fact that the central government regulation states that the small-scale fisheries is open access. So to close my presentations, here is my statement. First, internal market access and then, of course, to be expand because of the population increase and particularly the increase of the welfare of those who are in importing companies' populations. But as I also show you, the logic of this market with the first and second cases, they have different system, not only formal system, but practice, as I explained in these two cases. Local community and business play their own logic, they have their own reason, they have their own practice. And of course, when these two systems interacted, they produce consequences, either bad and good. Maybe the first one, we can say a bad examples of how international market influence local communities and local fisheries, and the second one might be a good example, but still something have to be done to make both cases become a good things. So producing good connection and producing good connections and consequences. Let's learn from these cases are needed. Also need a guided collaborative process involving mapping of the two systems, identifying potential clashes and synergies, and also negotiating an alignment of the particularly the two potential clashes, conflicts, or two potential synergy that might that potential synergies that derived from the interconnections of the two systems. That is more or less of my presentation. This presentation were mostly taken from these three publications of mine, 2013, 2016, and 2022. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Dedi, for your presentation and information. And now we continue to the discussion session and Q&A session. We have some students asking with interesting question. I really appreciate for the participants' engagement, and I will read I think 3 questions to Dr. Suadi and 3 questions to Dr. Dedi. Let's start with first question to Dr. Suadi. The question is from Muhammad. In recent years, we introduced with new model in resources management, blue economy, and circular economy models, and compared to common models of fisheries management and Indonesia resources status, what will be the best result in Indonesia fisheries management? Please, Dr. Suadi.
Thank you, Pak Tony. In terms of fisheries management, if we see the common models, as I mentioned, basically, how to say, fish-based or fisheries resource-based model. That's mean if we see the recent policy as blue economy or circular economy, I think this definition is almost similar in the term of definition. If we read Poli related the blue economy, he introduced with let's simplify as a zero waste model in which all the resources could be used as resource for another activity. Let's say if anchovy, for example, in a case of Dedi, if we cannot sell all of them to the market, so we still have, let's say, less in a term of the quality, but we can add value added to this commodity as another product. Let's say during the processing of this product, we still have a waste, so the waste can be used for other activities. That's how the blue economy or circular economy work. So I think in that perspective, we can see that how to add value of the fishery, and could be one of possible solution or possible model for managing the fisheries, not only the catch aspect. When I said the common models, basically we correlate the fishing effort with the production that we get, whether it will contribute high profitability in the term of maximum economic yield, or the production in the term of the total number of catch that we have, or in the term of the number of people working in fisheries. I think that there are a little bit difference in the concept. That's my explanation, Pak Tony.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Suadi. And the second question is about flying fish egg business, and this business will impact to the fish conservation, and how we could overcome the problem, because they don't only collect the eggs but also the fishes. That is the question, Dr. Suadi, about the flying eggs.
Yeah, I believe Pak Dedi could add an answer for these questions, because it is related with the human factor in fisheries management, how the flying fish fisher move from one fishing ground to other fishing grounds to get the catch, whether targeting the eggs or even the fish itself for consumption. And as I mentioned in my presentation, I believe that we need the best scientific evidence about the stock. That's basically what we need about those fish. And this is the most challenging here in context of Indonesian fisheries. What is the stock of the flying fish? That's one question. So that if we understand the stock, and then probably, as Khalid said, that we can make a matrix out of what level of the exploitation level. If we understand that the fish stock is overexploited, for sure we need to prohibit it, or let's say not fully prohibited the management scheme for the fisheries. As for instance, we see for other case, let's say lobster. A few years ago, when the policy prohibited the size of certain certain size of the lobster, and many of activities could not sell the undersize. That's one of the scheme. For sure, it's not. That's a technical solution, but I believe that not enough in the context of our fisheries management. Only applying the technical solution. We need to other aspect. Yeah, probably I hope Adhuri could add an answer related with the human aspect of this flying fish, because this flying fish not only, I believe, not only an economic activities. This is the livelihood. This is the culture of some of our fishermen in many parts of Indonesia, particularly in Sulawesi or other part of in the eastern part of Indonesia. That's Pak Tony, I think my answer.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Suadi. And maybe Dr. Adhuri have some comments regarding the flying fish egg business. Still mute, Dr. Adhuri.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
The question is about flying fish egg business, and this impact the fish conservation, and how could we overcome the problem, because they don't only collect the egg but also the fish.
Oh, okay. So I give you another example from the islands to the community in the island, because they have communal of their territory. So they put a kind of regulations to the. They don't themselves fish for the flying fish egg. Yeah, it was the outsider fisheries about that. So they put a kind of entity, and also the maximum numbers of aggregating device for the flying fish. It was in the case of the islands, it was followed by the fishers. So that kind of agreement can be made, I think, in other places as well, assuming that local people has kind of strong traditions over their management territory, and as well as local regulations. Because in the context of this government, I don't think regulations on that. Yeah. I would like to answer Professor Gardner questions about the benefits of the entry fee of the foreign and outsider officers assessing local communities. May I answer that question?
So, yes, Dr. Adhuri. I think because there is a connection problem.
Okay.
You can
so for the
question.
first case, so for the research that I was conducted for one case was during the new automatic 1997. Actually, aquatic fishing vessels are allowed to operate Indonesia through a kind of joint venture arrangement with Indonesian company. So they have to pay the government some amount of money to get together with their Indonesian companies. But since there's some money taken by the government for that. But since these live free fish operations were illegal, so the company, when they got into the local communities to protect their illegal operation. They should provide right to different level government officials, yeah, and also to the community. They have, particularly in this regard, to the head of the village, or traditional elite. They have to pay a kind of contract money. The amount of which different. It depends on how long they want to fish in that particular territory, or it can also be in addition to the coastal waters or the they want to also access the land property. Focus up in there, based on example, that also speak of how much they have to this area. Or actually, if formally, even in the traditional, the lease money should be given to the community. For then the community will led by the formal leaders of the community will distribute the money for usually public facilities, and also, for example, a mosque or church, things like that. The amount of this ranges from during that time from 5 to 15 million rupiah. So around maybe 5 to 10 American dollars during that time. I hope that answer the questions of Professor Gardner. The second question is if this international market also influence conservation and local fish market. Yes, certainly yes. Even now, if we here, for example, in Selayar, not Wakatobi, in Selayar, there's a big marine park. There's apprehensions of local fisher using cyanide in their operations. Most probably associated with this, so they are fishing in Mada. And also, of course, the buying of the fishing vessels in Maluku, in the islands in particular, also influence local market, because this supply, this company, meaning that local supply also of course decrease. This is for the businesses, because the local price also increase because of the decreased supply taken out by the exporter. That are the two questions that I got so far. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, well, thank you, Dr. Suadi and Dr. Adhuri, because our time is limited. We have to end the session for today. I thank the invited speakers, Dr. Suadi, Professor Gardner, and Dr. Dedi Adhuri for sharing the information and knowledge. I apologize for to the audience regarding some the unanswered questions, since our time is limited. And thank you for your participation. And I hope to see you again in another occasion. Good afternoon, everyone, and applause to our speakers, Dr. Suadi and Dr. Adhuri. Thank you very much, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Suadi and Dr. Dedi Adhuri.
Pak Dedi, terima kasih Pak Dedi.
My pleasure. Sama-sama, terima kasih.
Ya, sama-sama. Next session, next session will be facilitated by Dr. Eko and will be started at 4:15 p.m. Thank you for your attention and have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you.
Terima kasih Pak Suadi.
Sama-sama.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. To the all participants, fisheries management, tropical aquaculture and fisheries management summer course. We will going to the next agenda, as noted by the committee. In this moment, we will make some discussion based on the presentation from 4 groups, but I think only 3 groups that are ready to present about fisheries in Indonesia. So we will start from the first group. May I choose? Sorry. I will your instructor with Dr. Jumanto. So I will choose the group 2 lead by Pak Edi. Pak Edi, Pak Edi, Indonesian 2. Then following by Indonesian 3, group Indonesian 3, Mas Victor Adi, with the title effect on climate change on capture fisheries and coping strategy for sustainable use. And then the Indonesian 4 lead by Pak Ngurah, country report Indonesian fisheries. So I think we will starting soon because time is running fastly. Maybe Pak Jumanto have some note or like or another before we starting this session.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Pak Eko, for a chance to speak up to starting this. I just come with you, so no problems. So you can continue. So we can accompany the discussion this evening. So I think the rule we just follow what's already written. So we can start what you have choose the team or the group which will start to present this material. Okay, thank you.
Pak Edi, Mr. Edi, and then Mr. Victor and Pak Ngurah, you have around 10 minutes for presentation. Then in the end of the session, we will discuss your topic. So time is for your Mr. Edi.
Thank you, Mr. Eko, and also Mr. Jumanto, and all the facilitators of this summer course in tropical aquaculture and fisheries management, just Gadjah Mada. My name is Dedi Moko, and I am representing the Indonesian 2 groups. And for the first introduction, for now I am staying in Semarang City because I am the lecturer from the Negeri Semarang, but I also continuing my study in the program of postdoctoral program at Faculty of Agriculture, Universitas Gadjah Mada, under the supervisor of Professor Dr. Ernad Junun Sartohadi.
Nice.
Is it possible for me to present my PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay, well, so basically, our team want to present about the preliminary fishing ground mapping in Kendal Coastal Area. And in this presentation, we brought several institutions following with this topic. The first one is UNES, and then the second one is Universitas Diponegoro, and also we have some participants from Universitas Gadjah Mada, Universitas Brawijaya, Institut Pertanian Bogor, and also the BRIN, or Indonesia Research Institute. And in here, we want to deliver our overview that
Yes. Make a presentation view first.
Okay, okay, sir. Wait a second. Okay, is it good?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Eko, for reminding me. Well, for the first overview, we brought the fishing ground mapping is a way to determine the areas that have the potential for fishing activities. And we delivered the objectives in our research in here to understand the marine environment planning and management through the fishing ground map, and learn what materials and conditions are needed for fishing ground potentials. And the last one is learn about the procedures to conduct the fishing ground map. So maybe our research will relate to the geoinformation analysis or geoinformation sciences, because several members from our team comes from the geoinformatics science, including me. So maybe it's related to the mapping activities or even the spatial analysis. Okay, for the keywords in our research, we brought the fishing ground mapping itself, sea surface temperature, oxygen, chlorophyll A, turbidity, suspended sediment, geometer, refractometer for the instrument, and also water thermometer. And the satellite imageries, we brought the Modis Aqua, and then for the software or application, we use CDAS and ArcGIS. Okay, and then for the first introduction, fishing ground points are quite close to the marine protected area, or MPA concept. MPA is the simplest concept for marine environment planning and management, and it's a useful concept for preventing the massive damage of climate change. Since our topic of the presentation today is about the climate change issue, so we think that by presenting the fishing ground mapping that related to the MPA concept, so it's quite related to the topic of climate change. Okay, and talk about the climate change, I think that we already know about this report from the UN that the ocean is the solution to climate change, but also ocean is the first variable or the first element that the affected by the climate change. Okay, actually, I can open this picture because I hyperlinked the picture to the website of the UN. So we can see when I click this picture, so we can see the changes of the coral reefs and also the distribution of the fish itself. Whenever it increases the temperatures, it will follow it by the losing of the ecosystem. Okay, and then for the next introduction, to begin, warm up a little bit by conducting a short discussion. The first one is there any standard for a certain fish to live? Or actually or maybe fish can live freely, or is there any standard for fish to live? And then the second question is, can we make a static map for fish activities. Is it possible to do that? So let's get started. Well, actually, if we want to make the fishing ground mapping or fishing ground potential, there are a lot of variables or a lot of parameters that we need to involve for our mapping activities. The first one is physical parameters, consists of DO or dissolved oxygen, and also alkalinity, pH, and also heavy metals. And also the biological parameters that consist of coliform bacteria, nitrogen, phosphorus, and also total solids. And where these research we brought, so we worked in the nearshore zone or nearshore area. So we were not conducting the activities in the deep ocean, but it's only in the nearshore zone. So why we decided to choose the topic, because from the gross domestic product of Indonesia in 2020 by the sector or by the industry, eventually that agriculture, forestry, and fishing takes the first place. Take the second place of the GDP. So it means that fishing or agriculture in general is quite important to be analyzed or to be researched, because it takes a huge place, or it takes important part for our country development. Okay, so the methodology in our research, we start from the level 3 browser ocean color that we took from the NOAA US, and then we use the application named as CDAS, and we do the spatial analytical things, and also we use the Microsoft Excel for extracting the data. And the last one, we lay out the map with the ArcGIS. And then this is the short video for where we took our samples for this research. So the question is what we have gotten from the activities in the field. The samples location actually following the local fishermen, where they find the fish in the nearshore zone. So in here in the field, we learned a lot of things from the local fishermen, and then the route of the samples actually also following the route of the fisherman itself. And then we want to know where is the best location of the fishermen's of the area that fishermen take the fish or doing the fishing. Okay, and then this is for the NOAA data. Ocean color, we took the DO or dissolved oxygen by using the chlorophyll A, and also we took the sea surface temperature to model the fishing ground potential. So we know the limitation from this research that we only use 2 parameters. So maybe for the future research, we can do for all the parameters to make the good mapping for the fishing ground. And this is the result we compare with the different season. The first season is the dry season, and then the second one is for the rainy season. So this is the distribution. In the left side is the sea surface temperature distribution, and then in the right side is the chlorophyll A concentration in the near shore zone of Kendal Regency area. And then this is for the laboratorium analysis. We measure the DO itself, salinity, and conductivity and turbidity. And then this is the condition of where the fishermen takes their fish in the sea. And this is also the activities of the laboratorium. And this is the final result. From the road of fishermen, we made a map. We made a map where the best location for getting several fishes, several types of the fish. So in here we can make a model, or we can make a very interactive map. We put several fish in the certain location that quite suitable to live in the location that we already measured. So maybe we can do this continuously, so we can deliver all this information to the fishermen so they can do the fishing activities precisely. So maybe these activities, or our activities in this Indonesia 2 groups, can be the embryo of the smart or precise marine agro system. Maybe that's from us. Thank you so much, and my apologies for any circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Edi. I think it's very exciting presentation. Combine many factors to predict the fishing ground, especially in the northern Kendal Regency. Okay, we will continue to the next presentation. Will be presented by Pak Victor Adi and Sania Farah. Or Pak Edi, sorry, Pak Adi.
Yes, sir.
Pak Victor Adi. Yeah.
I'm ready.
Okay. So his time is your Pak Victor Adi, Mas.
My slide can clearly seen in.
Yes, clearly seen.
Yes. Good afternoon. I am Victor Adiminata, that represent Indonesia 3rd group. Our presentation will tell about effect of climate change on capture fisheries and coping strategy for sustainable use. Is the climate change changing? Yes, it is. Some evidence occur, such as water temperature increases, shifting of season, extreme season phenomena, and the other phenomenon is the intensification of El Nino and La Nina, Indian Ocean dipole, and other index of climate. The effect of climate change differ between migrating species and non-migrating species. The implication of climate change for migrating species, such as migration pattern, shifting of shifting and to lower latitude or higher latitude, and inhibiting growth of organism, the presence of invasive species, and so on. However, different effects of climate change on non-migrating species are coral bleachings because not firstly motile move to another sea and change in reproduction pattern of mollusks. The change of cell morphology also can be observed. Based on first figure in the left side, we can see the tuna migration was observed slightly moving to southern latitude in 2012. There are several major tuna commodity. One of them is eastern little tuna that contribute the biggest production capture in fisheries in this time scale. However, besides of this capture fisheries, the growth of aquaculture production is tend to be higher in next year of this time. Here is another case study that conducted in southern part of East Java, Perigi waters. Another dynamic phenomenon of pelagic fish in southern water can be influenced by water temperature, chlorophyll A, and Indian Ocean dipole. Indian Ocean dipole is like the analogy of Indian Ocean dipole is the El Nino or La Nina in Indian Ocean. On the middle figure on top panel right here, there is a negative correlation between chlorophyll A and sea surface temperature. In line with them, one species were categorized as dominant catch in certain years, such as in 2011, Indian's catch replaced the dominance of Balisnera in previous year. In this plot, suffer plot, we can see in axis panel, the A plot in this right here is sea surface temperature tend to be higher in some years and can be impacted by IOD in Indian Ocean dipole. The catch effort of different species change every year and related to feeding behavior in food chains. The catch of Sardina lemuru was very dynamic. If we see in last decade, very evident during El Nino and collapse during La Nina years. The collapse of Nasional Muru occurred in 2010 and 2014, and the pattern happened again in 2017 and 2018. The fluctuation of this catch will impact the fish industry, fish gain in Bali Strait. The big question is arise, asking where have the Nasional Muru gone? This is the unexpected fish landing is higher in 2019. There is some analysis regime shift. Nasional Muru seems fit to regime shift in long term or periodic cool and warm cycle. In this bottom panel, the schematic migration can be seen horizontal migration and vertical migration. Horizontal migration to the north or the south. As we know, Nasional Muru is pelagic fish that can migrate to highly migrate and highly gene flow in first area. In high latitude, we can see Nasional Muru can be catch in Manado waters and Sulu Celebes Sea, and the south migration can be Perigi waters and the southern part of East Java, and vertical migration driving to lower depth, depend on the thermocline depth during neutral, La Nina, and El Nino event. For the non-migrating fish, shellfish at the South Malang, there is the biodiversity loss can be observed. There are only 30% of approximately 45 species shellfish that can be still found alive at Panjang Beach, South Malang, East Java. Maybe my partner will explain this slide.
Okay. So the presentation will be for another participant, Pak Adi.
Yes, my member can explain this slide. It is possible, or
it's okay, no problem. Please choose your member to continue your presentation. Sania or Mbak Sania?
Maybe Mbak Sania.
See, I will check in the participant list.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, Mbak Sania is absent. I think you can continue to read. It's okay, no problem.
All right, sir. In this third figure, we can see the Indonesia climate change mitigation activity. There are 4 remarks that can be seen. The potential mitigation that can be conduct and will optimize in next year. The use of solar and wind power, as well as the use energy efficient equipment in ship, fishing vessel, modernization through energy efficiency design index, development of blue fishing port, and public advocacy and public awareness campaigns to any stakeholder related to capture fisheries. Future tasks: climate change is real and can damage marine organisms. Oceanography and marine organisms vary in time and spatial scale. So, ocean like a jigsaw puzzle need to complete the ocean model for future marine management. Climate change is everyone's problem. Cooperation with all parties is needed to monitor ocean and its effect on marine organisms. According to SDG goals. Thank you very much. Hopefully useful.
Thank you very much, Mas Adi, that have presenting a topic about effect of climate change in fisheries, especially in the small pelagic fish in the, I think you talk in the southern coast of East Java. So we will going to the last group. Unfortunately, I got information from the committee that Pak Ngurah and other group member still in the field to get some field observation. I think any participant or any other member who will presenting the topic from the Indonesian fourth group. Okay, I will check another member. Novita Panigoro. Novita, do you will present your group PPT? Novita or Putu Desa? It's the member participant who involved in the member Indonesian Fort. Pak Jumanto, nobody, not participant from the Indonesian Fort presenting. So we will continue to the next session discussion. Okay, committee said okay. So I think we have two topic that presented by Pak Edi, very exciting presentation, and also from the Mas Adi Winata, very interesting topic. So we will open maybe open two questions from the participant, and don't forget to inform to whom the question will be addressed. So any participant, please raise hand. Or maybe Pak Jumanto maybe have some note. I think it's related to the Pak Jumanto expertise.
Okay, so not ever the chance. Let's to discuss this paper already presented. It's very interesting in the northern area of Semarang Coast, Kendal Coast, that location for starting take place. This mean what's mean that what's that? What the first topic? I forgot it. Climate change.
Nah,
prediction. Oh yeah, prediction fishing ground. So
yeah.
The question is why the potential fishing ground is different with the real for fishing ground. Yeah, that's this is the first statement that the location for production, high fish catching, is a little bit different with the potential for fishing ground. Why? Is this because of there are marine MPA, marine protected area, located there. So for fishing activities is not allowed, or other reason. This is the for the first paper, for the first presentation. And the second one is from Pak Adiwinata. This is very interesting that climate change affect for fishing, and during the El Nino condition, the higher catch rate almost 2,000 ton, yeah. And during the La Nina is very low. And the question is where the anchovy gone? Is this just stay there or moving there? It means that it's still in this area. Maybe they swimming in the bottom, in the little bit deeper ocean, a little bit above the what means that the border between the high temperature and lower temperature, that we call thermocline area, a little bit in it, because the species cannot cross to the they will avoid the boundary of the thermocline area, and maybe still in there, so that the fish maybe cannot be catch because the fishing gear cannot read this population, this fish population, or they move, they migrate to other area. And this is the still in question. That they will this very interesting to discuss. Okay, Pak Eko, who will
Oke, Pak Edi.
start.
Oke, mungkin Pak Edi will give a response to Pak Dr. Jumanto question or a comment. Pak Edi?
Yes, Mr. Eko.
You give could you give some comment or information to Dr. Jumanto about his question?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Eko and also Prof. Jumanto for the question. But my apologies if the sound is quite noisy because I'm in the field activities right now. So the question is about why the fishing potential is quite different with the actual data, and also Professor Jumanto also mentioned about the MPA, that it's true some areas in Indonesia and also in other areas outside Indonesia has a restricted area that not to be captured for the fishes, and it's called as a marine protected area. But in this research, as we mentioned before, that we made a buffer zone. So it's not really like a point here, not like a point, single point, but it's a quite wide area, because we all know that the fish move quite, or the pelagic ecosystem moves dynamically. So that's why in our map result, we made a buffer zone, like a first area, or we call it as a core area, that have the requirements or have the conditions with the chlorophyll A and sea surface temperature that quite suitable for certain fishes. And also we made a second buffer zone that have lesser fishes activities in there. So that's why maybe why the potential fishing ground mapping is quite different with the actual data. And maybe in this terminology of MBA, we need to make
how to say, we need to make a clarification in here. The protected terminology maybe need to be how to say, need to be discussed again, because in our paper or in our activities in this research, we want to deliver to the readers that protected terminology in here is not only restricted, but also free to be accessed with the some notice. Maybe that's my own answer, Professor Sumanto. Maybe my friends from Indonesia too can help to answer the question. Thank you so much, Dr. Eko and Prof. Sumanto.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Edi. You very have a good spirit. Now still in the field. I think you continue your research in the field as your presentation. To continue your.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Maybe Pak Jumanto, Pak Mas Adi, you can respond Pak Jumanto. But I think Pak Jumanto should make a short question. Okay, make a short question, to Pak to Mas Adi Winata. Okay.
Yeah, the short question is, where does where the fish go during La Ninas? Because during the La Nina, almost no catching fish. So where does they go?
Okay, Mas Adi, time's here to answer the Pak
The
Jumanto
answer
question.
to the question of Dr. Jumanto is still investigated in our study. We will use eDNA in different season. So we can have a complete investigation during 1 year to another year.
Okay.
Because this fish is quite difficult to catch in La Nina condition. Maybe is enough to answer the question of Dr. Jumanto.
Yeah, that is my question. Why during the La Nina, the fishermen cannot catch this fish? So the possibilities is the population is decreased because the environment is not suitable for this fish. So their population is very low. So it will difficult to catch this one. The second one is maybe they migrate, might make migration to the area that the environment is suitable. Yeah, maybe in the western area or the northern area. But if the migration, the fishermen in other area cannot catch this fish or cannot catch this fish. But this is still in question. Still, just maybe just predict that make migration. And the third one, they move to, because this La Nina is the cooler in the upper, then in the deeper layer still warmer, so this fish will move deeper in the boundary between lower and higher temperature in the thermocline area. Maybe just because the fishing gear of fishermen cannot get the fish in the deeper area, more than maybe 100 meters. So the thermocline area, I don't know what the depth is this area. For instance, in the lakes in Manado, the thermocline area is around 150 meters. So, but I think in the certain area of Java, I think it's around 150. While the fishermen fishing gear only can catch fish between 30 and 50 meters. So this is maybe just what we call just predict. that they will move, but in the bottom layer and migrate, or their population is decrease. But
Okay.
this is your task to to answer this one. Thank you. Okay,
I
Mr.
think
Eko,
it's
please.
very good discussion in this session. I have one question for Pak Edi, but no need to answer now. My question is, there are many center of fishing activities in the northern coast of Java, but why you choose in Kendal? Yeah, this is my question, but no need to answer now. Okay, all participants, I think it's very warm discussion in this session, but we are now reached in the end of the session. But before I close this session, please give applause, big applause for Pak Edi and the team, and also Mas Victor Adira and the team. Okay, and now we will close this session. Thank you very much for your attention, Pak Jumanto, and also all committee. I hope we can see you in the next time in the good condition, and take care. Good afternoon. See you. Bye.
See you. Bye.
Okay, we end them in the 5 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Eko and Dr. Jumanto, for taking this discussion. For tomorrow, we will have the next group discussion for Indonesian 4, 5, Malaysian, Myanmar, and China. Okay, see you for the next schedule. Bye-bye.
Okay, see you.
See you. Thanks.
Let me leave the Zoom room. Okay.
Yeah, sure, you can. Thank you all.